Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating, the invisible architecture of global governance. When you really stop and think about it, we've got nearly 200 independent countries out there, completely different economies, vastly different cultures, yet somehow, planes safely cross borders every single day, mail actually gets delivered across the planet, and global trade just keeps flowing. What is the actual framework holding all of this together? Let's uncover it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the central conflict of our international system is that it's fundamentally anarchic. And hey, by that, I don't mean it's just a constant riot in the streets. It just means there is no supreme, overarching global government dictating what sovereign nations can or cannot do, right? So how exactly does a world with no single global boss manage to avoid total chaos? Well, the answer lies in international organizations, or IOs. They are the invisible gears turning behind the scenes, somehow getting countries to cooperate even when their interests aren't entirely identical or, frankly, completely incompatible. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Order out of chaos. 2. Supplying global public goods. 3. 5 lenses of world politics. 4. Actors, fora, and resources. 5. The rules of the game. And finally, 6. The future of global cooperation. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Order out of chaos.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that international cooperation was not born out of some, utopian idealism. Not at all. It was born out of desperate necessity. The modern architecture of global governance evolved through major historical milestones, usually following massive, horrific devastation. Look at 1815. After 20 years of nonstop bloodshed in the Napoleonic Wars, the Treaty of Vienna established the concert of Europe. That was a radical departure from the past, trying to keep the peace through regular meetings of great powers instead of just shifting military alliances around. Then, after the unbelievable loss of life in World War I, we get the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, creating the League of Nations, which was literally the very first permanent intergovernmental organization. And finally, rising out of the total ashes of World War II, the 1945 San Francisco Conference gave us the United Nations. Basically, each massive catastrophe forced nations to invent and refine a much stronger system to try and prevent the next one.
Moving right along to Section 2, supplying global public goods.
Beyond just trying to prevent World War III, these organizations serve a fundamental, everyday economic purpose. They supply global public goods. And what are those? They're goods that are freely available to everyone, they're non-excludable, meaning, you can't block someone from using them, and they're non-rival, meaning my use of it doesn't ruin it for you. And when we say global, we mean the benefits extend to literally every single person on the planet.
And this brilliantly illustrates the scale we're talking about. Think about a local fireworks display. That's a local public good, right? Anyone within eyeshot gets to enjoy it. National defense, that's a national public good. But what about a stable climate, or the eradication of global diseases, or heck, even something as incredibly standard as the metric system? Those are global public goods. You can't just run to the supermarket and buy climate stability. Supplying them requires massive, highly coordinated global efforts.
But here is the huge problem with that. Leaving these massive, planet-wide necessities to the private market totally fails. Why? Well, first off, the free rider problem. It's like that one person in a group project who does absolutely zero work but still gets the A. Countries can totally benefit from a stable climate even if they don't contribute a dime to fixing it. Then you've got spillovers, where one nation's pollution just drifts right across the border into another. And finally, short-sightedness. It's human nature. Politicians will naturally overvalue winning their next election over saving the distant future. Because of these inherent human and economic flaws, centralized international coordination isn't just some nice-to-have bonus. It is strictly necessary to keep the whole machine running.
Which brings us to Section 3, 5 lenses of world politics. So how do scholars actually study all of this? Well, think of these 5 theories as different pairs of glasses used to view the exact same world. And remember, we aren't taking sides here. We're just exploring the perspectives. Realism, for instance, focuses purely on military power. Through that lens, IOs only matter if they offer some kind of strategic advantage. Liberalism, on the other hand, views them as contractual bargains for mutual economic benefit. Marxism, conversely, argues the entire system is inherently unequal, and that IOs are just used to sustain wealth disparities. Then you have constructivism, which believes the world is shaped by ideas and norms. Basically, IOs dictate what is socially taboo on a global scale. And finally, feminism focuses on the hyper-masculinized environment of politics to uncover hidden power dynamics. Every single lens sees a completely different truth about the exact same organizations. It's wild. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, Actors, Fora, and Resources.
Let's break down the practical mechanics. In the real world, international organizations actually function through a triad of roles: actors, fora, and resources. As fora, they are physical meeting places. Think of the iconic UN headquarters in New York. It serves as a literal, physical stage where states come together to debate. Pretty straightforward, but it gets much, much more complicated when we look at their roles as actors and resources. See, IOs can be independent actors. This happens when an organization acts with its own autonomy. A great example is the International Criminal Court independently issuing an arrest warrant. Boom, they act and they force the world to react. Alternatively, IOs can act as resources. This is when states wield the organization as a political tool. Imagine the UN Security Council operating almost like a trademark brand. If a country wants its military operation to be viewed as legitimate, it desperately wants that UN peacekeeping stamp of approval. So these organizations are caught in this constant, really tricky tension between acting on their own authority and being used as tools by powerful member states.
Section 5. The Rules of the Game.
Let's look at the actual administrative reality of how these organizations govern. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer complex variety of tools they use to get countries to fall in line. It's not just a single set of global laws. Not at all. They use binding treaties, prescriptive instruments like directives, policy incentives, technical standards, and even supporting blueprints.
To really understand how these apply, let's consider the extremes. On one end, you have rigid, legally binding treaties, like the UN Charter, where states formally commit to not attacking each other. High-stakes stuff. But on the exact opposite end, you have voluntary guidelines. These are highly flexible, bottom-up approaches. A great example of this is the OECD providing economic best practices. They don't force a country to adopt a policy, no way, but they establish such a high global standard that countries naturally scramble to meet it just to remain competitive. It's a totally different kind of power.
And to effectively enforce all these rules and supply those vital public goods we talked about, IOs really have to master 8 essential levers of change. They've got to cultivate shared values and display strong leadership to navigate the crazy world of politics. They absolutely need inclusive governance, backed by solid institutionalization and sustainable finance. And finally, they require the right instruments, strategic focus, and highly integrated networks. Honestly, if an IO fails at these, its rules remain just ink on paper.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 6, the future of global cooperation. Today, the multilateral system is facing really intense modern challenges when it comes to transparency and public trust. So the crucial point is this: the old, isolated way of governing from the top down, it simply won't survive modern skepticism. To stay relevant, international organizations have to evolve into what scholars are calling a new league of networks. This means bringing together not just state diplomats in suits, but scientists, technical specialists, NGOs, the private sector, and local actors. They have to do this to bridge the massive gap between lofty international rules and on-the-ground reality.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question about the incredibly fragile architecture of our global future. Will this new league of inclusive networks actually be enough to save global cooperation? Or, in the face of immense, complex challenges, will we retreat back into isolated nations? The framework that governs our world is entirely what we choose to make of it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the invisible systems around you.